We've all been given this blessing of life. And, call it whatever game you want, Monopoly or, whatever game, right? But play the game of life. Play it full out. It's really just relishing in every day.
Welcome to the Women Inspired Podcast, where together we explore ways to live our most joyful, aligned, vibrant lives. On this podcast, we draw inspiration from the lessons embedded in other women's stories, and we use them to catalyze our own growth and success. And we explore concepts and techniques from the fields of psychology and design thinking that can help us thrive and make the most of the one and only life we're ever going to have. My name is April Seifert. I'm a psychologist, an entrepreneur, and a self-proclaimed life experience junkie, and I'm your host and friend along this journey. This podcast is supported by Modern Well, a woman-centered co-opportunity workspace in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Friend, it is time to start living vibrantly, by design and with intention. Here we go. Hey friends, welcome back to the Women Inspired Podcast. My name is April Seifert and I'm your host, and I'm so excited for this week's interview because I had the pleasure of sitting down and talking to another woman who has such a similar outlook on life in spite of a number of adversities that she has experienced throughout her life. And I was so excited for this interview because so many times the concepts that I talk about on this podcast, the notions of radical responsibility and taking control of our lives and being intentional about how we set ourselves up for tomorrow, and the fact that life is short and we're not going to get another chance at it, and all of those pieces that I soapbox on and on about during this podcast, it can be so easy to look at, to think about those concepts and think, wow, that would be nice, except I have a lot of difficulty going on in my life, or I'm experiencing something really hard right now, and so I can't take responsibility. It's easy to cast those notions aside, except for the fact that lots of times I talk to people like this week's guest who have gone through incredible adversity in their life and are still going through incredible adversity in their life, yet they're embracing the notion of radical responsibility. They are intentionally working to create an experience going forward that's aligned to them, and that is the most joyful, vibrant experience that they can have. So I'm pumped for this week's interview because it's such a beautiful example of somebody who is just fully embracing life. So this week, you are going to meet a woman by the name of Nancy Solari. She is an authentic and a successful example of how you can absolutely live the life that you want with an empowered and positive mindset. And this is regardless of the challenges that you face. And Nancy is a beautiful example of someone who has faced adversity in her life, yet is moving forward with intention and positivity. Now, during her interview, she's going to talk about her backstory where, in her childhood, she was a witness to domestic violence within her family, and her parents ultimately got divorced. She had to call the police on her parents. That's incredibly difficult. She also talked about being diagnosed with a condition called retinitis pigmentosa, which is a condition that she and her two sisters have that she knew at the time would eventually lead to progressive blindness. And in fact, today, Nancy is legally blind. She doesn't drive. She uses assistive technology on her computer. Yet, she has an incredible company called Living Full Out. She is a life coach. She is an accomplished motivational speaker. She writes an incredible blog, does incredible media and videos and audio content. And she is just a bright light in the world, helping people to realize the gift that they have in their day, each and every day. We have such an awesome conversation about what, quote, living full out means to her. And she talks a lot about being intentional about what we value and what we spend our time on. But then once we have that list, making sure that we're getting a good balance of it. So maybe your career is really important to you, but so is your family, and so is your own self-care. Making sure that you're getting, I love how she describes this in her interview, a bite out of each of those slices of pie every single day. I just know you're going to love this interview. You're going to love her. You're going to be so inspired by her story and what she has to share with us in terms of lessons about how, even though, the majority of us are not facing legal blindness the way that she is, the stories and the lessons that she is sharing today are applicable regardless of the challenges that you're facing in your life. All of us have our own challenges, and the lessons that you're going to learn from Nancy today will help you be more resilient and help you thrive through that adversity. So I cannot wait any longer for you to meet Nancy Solari. Let's hear that interview. Nancy, I'm so excited that we are on this recording. We've tried a number of times and had to move this around. So this is like triply exciting that we were able to get this done, because I've been really looking forward to chatting with you. Thanks for being here.
Well worth the wait. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
This is awesome. So we got acquainted a while back, and I'm really excited for my audience to get to know you a little bit. So give us a little bit of back history on you.
Sure. So I guess a little bit of back history would be both the personal and the professional. And truly, we're all, divided like pies in our life, right? We have all these different aspects to us. But I would say, professionally, I've had multiple different careers, mainly many of them entrepreneurial. I've been in broadcasting, and I've been a real estate agent, and I had a singing career, and I've started my own company, Living Full Out, in 2008. So with all of those different professions came a lot of growth. And then personally, starting at a young age, around 10, I saw my parents go through a divorce, and there was domestic violence in that as well. So it's not every child's dream to call the police on their parents, but I did have that moment. And then I also went through finding out that I had what was called RP, retinitis pigmentosa. And actually, all three of my sisters have it as well. My two sisters, there's three of us that have it. And it's basically led me to be legally blind today. And I can go further into that later. And then later on in life, the challenges just keep coming, like life does, right? The hardships. So I've been through infidelity and infertility and a lot of different hard knocks, financial crisis. So the thing is it's the experience of life, right? And we're survivors, and we all have those winning moments, even despite the times that are hard. So that's just a quick little nutshell of who I am.
That is, that's amazing. Thank you so much for being here. And folks who are listening to this, you can guess as to why I was so excited for this interview, because Nancy's an example of someone who, sometimes in the space when people listen to podcasts that are really geared toward inspiration and motivation, it can be really easy to say, oh, that's so easy for you, because you probably haven't experienced any difficulties or challenges, or maybe you have, benefits or money or connections that other people don't have, and that's why you can do this. And ultimately, there have been so many women that I've talked to, and nearly every guest that I've spoken to, who has gone through something extremely difficult in their life and moved on and persisted in spite of that, and sometimes because of that, because those challenges teach us so much. And I don't even know where the right place to start is. As you have moved through these challenges in your life, and big ones, right? I mean, we're not talking about, small difficulty and small adversity here. How has your outlook on life changed? And how have you started to think about your role in how you create your life versus, being more of a passive participant in what's happening? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's a great question. What I would say is whenever I have a challenge, whenever I'm at that crossroad, one of the things that I've learned is that I've been here before, and I've survived it once, I'll survive it again. And truly, that can be any version of change. That can be losing a relationship that I thought was forever. That can be having a certain dream for myself that I had to let go of or adjust due to either my visual impairment or just time slipping away, right? And so the thing is, when you get to a crossroad, the best way to handle it and really get through that pain, get through that stress, is to know that you have been there before. The pain, the stress, the circumstances might have been different, but the feeling, the emotion, the uncertainty, the fear, knowing that we've survived something once gives me great comfort that I can survive it again. I mean, I don't know how long the pain will last. It might be a day, it might be a month, but I know I'll get through it. And the other part of that is I've really learned to value every day because you don't have tomorrow. There's no cure for my eye condition. So while I'm legally blind now and everything's blurry and just really hard to see definition of anything, I know a day could come where it's completely black. And so I got to really see as much as I can and just maximize the moment. Same with relationships. There's no guarantee. I oftentimes say that the people in our life, they're supporting characters, great supporting characters, but you're kind of the main character of your story. And there's no guarantee that people will be with you when you take your last breath. So it's just enjoying every day and every moment. And that too allows me to get past the hard times.
Oh, I like you so much. And I guarantee people who have listened to me a lot are probably giggling as they hear you say that. And I promise I did not pay her to say any of these things. She is saying them completely from her own perspective. You and I share so much of a similar outlook. One of the things I talk about on the podcast a lot is this notion that we're going to be here one time. We're going to get one shot at life. It's very finite. Time's the most non-renewable resource on the planet. So who we spend it with and how we choose to spend it and how enjoyable we decide to make that time, meaning how much we invest in ourselves and how much we, work to create an experience that aligns to us, it's critically important. I don't know, Nancy, how much you know about my background, but you and I share somewhat of a similarity. I've been living with multiple sclerosis for 25 years, and as part of the early stages of my diagnosis, I went blind twice, just randomly. It went away and then came back 6 months later and went away and then came back 6 months later. And although the long-term progression of my condition hasn't resulted in blindness like yours has, the unpredictability of it and the lesson that I learned around not taking your ability level for granted, not taking a single day for granted, not taking your life for granted is something that it's in my soul now, and I feel so compelled to tell other people about it.
Yeah, I'm with you, sister. Honestly, it is one of those things where for you it's MS, for me it's RP, and it's ironic that we each get two letters, but for somebody else it's going to be a divorce, a broken heart, never rebounding from a financial loss and feeling as if it's hopeless. And, I think that we all have to be just really good to ourselves, that when you're having a really hard day, don't wallow in it, don't play victim, but let yourself just really feel that bad day and what decisions could have been done differently, because I think we just have to learn from that, and then we have to let it go and just try to find a way to step forward into that uncertainty.
That's beautiful. Can we go back to your experience in the early stages of RP? And I ask that because you and I are in a unique position that we're both, down the road a little while in the conditions that we have. And with that time and experience comes perspective and learning what life means with a condition like this. But it's different than it was in the beginning when you're sitting with the uncertainty of it being very new. Can you tell us a little bit about the experience of realizing something was wrong and going through the experience of being diagnosed and learning that you have RP?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to give a reference point, we found out that we all three had RP right around Thanksgiving time in terms of where it was in the year. And it was just really heartbreaking for my mom to know that all three of her daughters would eventually go blind. They said that we'd all go blind by 40. We're all over 40 now, but we're all, very much struggling with being able to see anything in a clear way. And I remember the doctor telling me that I had a more mild case, but truly I think that's only because I was the youngest of the three daughters, and my sisters were, a couple years ahead of me, which meant that their eye condition was, more deteriorated than mine was. But one of the things is my middle sister and I, we decided to make a pact. We wanted to see Europe. We wanted to experience things. And so we did that. And I'm glad we did that, because today, if I go to Europe, which I went last year to Paris, and it was really hard to see the Eiffel Tower. But I can go back in my memories and remember that, when I could see better, I do remember seeing the Colosseum or the Vatican. And so again, I think that's all about just really living in the moment. And when you get news of any kind, you're going blind, you may have trouble walking, you have a terminal condition, it's game on, And so I put together that bucket list we hear about so often, and I just kept checking those things off. And I had great comfort knowing that my sisters and I were all in it together. We were kind of the three blind mice of the family, but I know that for a lot of people, they're the only one with a specific condition in their family. And the one thing I would say to that person is that support groups or just connecting with other people who have the same condition, I really embrace that. I started going to quite a few national conferences for blindness and low vision, and I started doing vision walks. And, I although it was scary to see people with canes and dogs and to know that one day that might be my reality, I also knew that I wanted to learn from them. What did I need to know now that was coming down the line? Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And it segues really interestingly. Well, not necessarily segues, but something that I want to call out about it is that even in that perspective of being very newly diagnosed with something that, is extremely scary. You were taking responsibility for your situation. You were saying, okay, well, this is what my path is going forward. What am I going to do now? I want to go see all these things while I still can. I want to learn as much as I can to set myself up for the future, being in that group of people who are having a similar experience to you and learning from them. That's a huge example of you taking responsibility for the position that you're in and where you're going to go from here. That's massive.
Yeah, it made it less scary. And so as my vision changed, I was having those, oh yeah, I remember they said this might happen. Or, oh yes, now I got to get the magnifier. Now I got to get the talking devices. But I knew it was coming. And, the other thing too, I'll share with you is that sometimes, well, I would say oftentimes, but sometimes when we go through an experience like that, I actually think it was meant to be that I had this experience of losing my vision, because I'm just not, I don't see things that would bother me. I'm not swayed by social media or the competition or, who's driving what, or, I can't even see my gray hairs or my wrinkles on my face, right? It's kind of interesting because my loss of my vision has allowed me to just be guided by my heart and my intuition. And it's not about what I see. I'm just not, I'm not overwhelmed or I'm not fazed by that.
That's amazing perspective. And it's a side of it that you wouldn't think about. It's a side of it that if you haven't been through that, it wouldn't occur, to you to think hey, I'm not going to know if I have gray hair. That's pretty awesome. I would love to just think through some of the practical steps that you took? Because, being in the position of having to look ahead in your future and know that your life, your day-to-day life was going to change so much. What were some of the really just practical things that you did to be able to set yourself up for those times that you knew were coming when your vision was going to shift and you would experience a change and see less than you did, prior?
Well, one of the things that I do, I'm a planner. So I know there's those spontaneous people that just don't have a plan. I definitely have a plan. And one of the things that I believe in is a list. And sometimes it's the list of things I need to do in a day. Sometimes it's my list of what I'd like to do in the week or the month. And then sometimes it's kind of my future list. And I remember being when I was in real estate. And so this was during a large phase of my vision changing, because in the first part of my 13 years of real estate, I drove and I knew the changes to my vision was happening, but it was gradual. And then mid to the end of my real estate career, I had to actually give up driving and get very resourceful with how I was going to show property without driving and a whole bunch of things. There's a lot of stories there. But what I used to do at open houses when people weren't there is I used to take a piece of paper, 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and I used to fold it like a book. And then I would just have different lists, and I would have like my work list, all the things I needed to do. And then I would have like my personal list and all the things that I wanted to do, or errands, things that I might need help with for other people, like shopping, buying earrings or whatever, buying groceries. And I share it with you because it really guided me along, and it allowed me to kind of shoot for what I wanted to accomplish. And some of that does have to deal with the eyes, because sometimes when you're knowing that things are going to change, like right now I'm learning how to use a program called Dragon, Speaking Dragon. A lot of attorneys have used it. A lot of people have professionally used it in the past, but I'm starting to use it now just because typing can become cumbersome when you can't see the screen, when you can't see what you're saying. So Dragon will allow me to eventually just speak out my emails, speak out anything that I want to write or type on the computer. And so it's something I have to learn now for the future. And honestly, I started purchasing this program and getting the training on it like a year ago. So some things that you want to do, they just take time to learn and time to acquire.
And I ask that not because I think your experience of your vision loss somehow, aligns perfectly to someone else's experience and here they're going to follow in your footsteps. Maybe that's the case. Maybe someone listening to this is experiencing something very similar to what you are. And, they're looking to this interview to understand practically how you move through that life stage and how you're dealing with this. But more so, I ask on a more general level, I ask that question because you get a clue. You're such a resilient person, right? You're in this position that's very difficult that a lot of people could sort of push away the notion that things might get worse, which means let's push away any opportunity to prepare for it, because that's admitting that something, worse off could happen down the pike. But you're not doing that. And you can see it in the way that you're preparing for what's to come next. Dragon being one example. My husband actually uses that same software. He's a physician, so he dictates notes with that same software. So he's up there talking to our computer pretty often. So you're in good company there. But it's neat to see how you are, in a courageous way, forward thinking and thinking about how you're going to take your next steps and set yourself up really well for it.
Well, and trust me, there are things that go sideways. Not every plan goes to queue. But at the same time, I like knowing that I have some control in my destiny. I can't control relationships. You can't control other people's behaviors. You can't control the flow of money always. You can't control, our vision or health issues. But I can control my ability to dream and then think of benchmarks or to-dos to get me closer to that dream.
That makes total sense. And it's something that I talk about a lot on the podcast, this notion of radical responsibility, where we're not necessarily at fault or to blame for the situation we're in. Many times our behavior didn't cause the situation we're in. We just find ourselves. Here we are. And we can take responsibility for where we go next and what we do. And I think your examples that you've given are just a beautiful way of showing, one person who's doing that. The other thing that I think is incredible about you and about what you've done with the work that you're doing is that you're taking these experiences that you're having and the lessons that you're learning, and you're sharing them with other people and helping other people who might not be in the same situation as you, but are experiencing their own challenges and their own friction points in their lives. You're helping them live as fully as they possibly can. So I'm hoping you can tell us just a little bit about the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you. So again, the company is called Living Full Out, and you can go to livingfullout.com. But the thing is it's our goal to help people identify, again, what is that goal? What is that dream? And you said it so perfectly early on, people don't want to feel stuck. People want to feel hopeful. They want to know that life is going to continue to flow in a positive direction. But sometimes if you don't know how to connect the dots, or you don't know what resources are available, it's hard to have that hope, especially if you don't feel like you have support. So we try to give, information multiple ways, whether it be blogs, our radio show, individual coaching. We just want to make sure that people have that support. And you're right. Part of my journey has been to kind of go through these hardships and share it. And I remember many different times. Like I said, it was really hard early on when I was losing my vision. I remember telling this one boyfriend, trying to explain, do you really want to date me? Because I'm potentially going to go blind. I remember just crying into my tiramisu, not really sure how to find those words. And then you have really taboo topics that people don't talk about, but happen all the time. I mean, I'd gone through a bankruptcy, and it took me a while to figure out how to find the words to talk about that loss. Or 5 miscarriages. How do you find the words to talk about that and the pain, but also the closure, and on and on and on. And so part of my goal has been to take away that taboo, to take away that sting and that shame, and allow people to kind of walk through it and, grab all those life lessons and then kind of get past it.
Hi, friends. I have a very important announcement. If you caught episode 124, you know all about what I'm about to tell you. But if you haven't, I want to make sure that you are in the know. As of August 1st, the Women Inspired podcast will become the Building Psychological Strength podcast. This pivot will focus the content of the show around the concepts of psychological strength and intentional life design, the 2 topics I get asked about more than anything else. I'm simultaneously beyond excited, but also a little bit sad. I'm sad because I'm transitioning out of a brand that has become such a big part of my life, but I'm beyond excited to transition fully in a direction that'll serve you at an even higher level. And that's the whole reason why I'm here in the first place. So, a few things will change. You'll notice new cover art, a new title, and a slightly different feel to the podcast going forward. The content of the podcast will focus more specifically on aspects of psychological strength and ways to apply life design to your own lives. Again, the 2 topics that I hear from you about most often. But other things won't change. I'll still be here. Each and every week, I'll still have the same dedication to bringing you guests, information, techniques, and tools to help you thrive in your life. And I hope you'll continue to join me each week. You don't have to do anything on your end. The change will automatically happen on August 1st, but I wanted to let you know ahead of time because I truly consider each and every one of you a dear friend. If you'd like more information about the transition, please catch episode 124. And thank you so much for being with me on this journey. It's such important work because it's something that I've talked about in previous episodes as well, where it can be easy to, look at your life circumstances and assume that they, this is how they are. It's funny. There's someone who's close to me in my life who frequently says, "Oh, I feel really lucky that I'm a healthy person." And I don't say anything in that moment, but in my mind, I always think, well, you're saying that as though your hand has been dealt. I mean, the circumstances of our lives do change so rapidly. And the position that we're in now, you mentioned it before, you said it beautifully, like we're not guaranteed that relationship that we have, those health abilities that we have, anything that we have right now, we're not guaranteed that, for the rest of our lives. And so being able to, and having someone like you who's giving tools and content and resources and techniques to help people move through those times of struggle and talk about them and be more open about the fact that things aren't going perfectly, it's just valuable because we don't get that from a lot of places. It's not something that's common. In fact, when you do go through something difficult, maybe you experienced this with friends and family when you were losing your eyesight, but people pull away because they're not sure how to address it. So I love the work that you're doing because it just gives people permission to speak about things that we just don't typically.
Well, thank you for that. And you also said something that kind of came to mind here too, is that we have to be careful to choose our words, choosing the words that we say to other people and choosing the words we say to ourselves. Because your friend, obviously not in any malicious way, is talking about her great health while you're struggling, and so sometimes we have to find the right words to be grateful for what we have, but also be aware what other people might be going through. I had a really good friend of mine. I can't take credit for this, but I'm going to pay it forward and pass this on. A really good friend of mine who's a coach as well. She, throughout all these difficult times, I've kind of gone to her and she's been a great sounding board. But one time I think I was having a woe's me moment. And she said to me, she goes, "Nancy, would you walk into a bad neighborhood with bars on the windows and, trash all over and clearly unsafe?" And I said, "No, that would be ridiculous. So I wouldn't do that." And she goes, "Well, why would you go into a bad neighborhood in your mind?" And so when we go into that bad neighborhood in our mind, where we know we're not saying words that support us, when we're not, living on purpose, where we're maybe sabotaging ourselves or being in a toxic environment or with toxic people, get out of that bad neighborhood, get back to the place that is hopeful, that is safe.
And it's something that's an important message for people to hear because I don't think people realize the thoughts that we have, they're just thoughts. You don't have to entertain every thought that goes through your head, and you don't have to follow every thought down some dark alley with it. You don't have to chase after them. Our minds conjure up, I don't know how many thoughts per day, a lot, thousands and thousands, right, per day. We don't have to follow every single one of them. We can decide to just notice and let go a set of thoughts. And we can decide also to think something else in those moments. We can decide to intentionally change what's going on in our mind. We have that ability, but if left unchecked, our minds do typically go down that negative route. It's adaptive for them to, they've evolved to do that. But it doesn't serve us well to go down that back alley with them, as your friend was saying. That's such a gorgeous way to describe it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you do that, it's so interesting. When we say those negative words to ourselves, we feel that yucky feeling. Our heart is sad. Our soul is sad. But really what we're doing is we're giving our power away. So there's not room, like for me in my life, there's not room to dwell on blindness. I got a life to live. I mean, I could be gone off this planet for some other reason than blindness, right? And if I spend my entire life worried about going blind, I'm going to miss it. And that's true for so many hardships we all face. If you just dwell on that one hardship, you're going to miss the lessons. You're going to miss the people who are there right in front of you, the positive moments to celebrate.
I totally agree. I'm wondering if you've thought about the difference between, because there definitely is a difference, I believe, a difference between grief, like acute grief. So I definitely went through a period of time when I was diagnosed that I would call grieving, where there was just a change in my identity. I'm now a person who has this condition and I don't know how to come to terms with that. So that I was grieving the loss of this identity that I had before. I was grieving the loss of what felt like a very certain path forward that I didn't have anymore. To me, that acute grief in situations that are difficult is different than what you're talking about around our more chronic outlook toward life and making the most of it. I'm curious if you've thought about that at all and how you would describe that difference.
It's a really big question, but here's what I would say, because I always like to bring it down to a tangible example. I'm not saying I cry every day, but I think that if you're having a hard day, it's okay to have a little cry every now and then. If you're angry, and I don't drive, but have that moment where you're singing loud in the car and you're frustrated. If you're happy and you're laughing, then laugh and be happy in a big way. I think sometimes we have to get the emotions out of our body, because it's kind of like a soda can, right? If you take the soda can and you shake it up and then you pop the top, it's going to explode. So if you don't allow yourself to expel that energy, and it could be working out, that's a good way as well, but I really think you have to feel that emotion. That's why working out isn't always the best, because you're physically getting that energy out of your body, but you're not honoring the emotion. And so I think that's a way to get through any grieving process. Also, for me, music has always been my home, meaning that I associate times in my life with songs. And if I go back and I listen to that song, it's like sitting down with an old friend. Even a really hard song, breakup songs, or there's songs I've had through my miscarriages times, or there's songs that I would listen to back when my parents would be fighting, and just things that I would go to, and so I think it's finding ways to identify moments in your life, so that you can get through it, and that will help through the grieving process as well.
I love that. Going back to the work that you do within your company, I love the name. I love the name Living Full Out. What does that mean to you? What does Living Full Out mean to you?
Living Full Out is about really embracing life. And we talked about the unknown, right, earlier on. Living full out means that you're going to wake up every day and you're going to give it your all, right? You're going to be a good friend. You're going to dig in and do your best at work. And you're not going to leave yourself behind. If you want to, have a little treat along the way, do that. To live full out means that you're harnessing all aspects of your life. I mean, that's where a lot of times people get lopsided, is maybe they become a workaholic and their personal life goes, down the tank, right? Or sometimes they throw everything into their relationship and they become quite codependent, and they kind of lose other identities of themselves. So when you live full out in life, again, it's kind of like considering yourself as a pie, like a whole pie. And if you were going to slice that pie up, you would have, a career slice, a friend slice, a hobby slice. And so when I live full out in life, I literally wake up every day wanting to take a nibble of each of those pieces of the pie. Just a little nibble. Because again, we don't know if we have tomorrow. So I don't want to go big on one slice when there's so many more other areas I could go.
That's a really great description of it. It's a beautiful approach at living more of a balanced life, which I don't think a lot of us do. And it's a great example of a framework to think about how we're spending our time and how we're spending our energy. Are we putting too much of it into one of those slices? And, there are seasons of life that do require us to focus, but in general, having a little bit of balance between those pieces and those aspects of our lives is so critically important, because you can't go 100% in to one aspect of life, career, for example, or even family, for example. That's a trap that a lot of us can fall into, is just giving to those around us without focusing on, our own goals. So both of those have their detriments. And I love the way that you describe that, because it helps you think about, are you hitting all of those slices in each day? Are you really going after all of those things that are important to you? And I think that's actually another interesting thing. Like, as I think about that pie, or those slices of that pie, deciding what aspects of your life get a slice of pie seems like you could align that so well to your value system and to the things that you really care about. Those things go into your pie, and the things that you don't value and the things that you don't care about as much don't get to have a place in there, because you can't focus on everything. You have to focus on the things that you really care about.
100%. And you have to quiet the noise of other people's expectations of what you should do. They get their pie and you get your pie.
That's so beautiful. And that's hard for people to understand. It's, I run a 6-week program. It's an intensive life design program called Life Design Lab. And one of the key, pillars of that program that I talk with people about is, we're going to use the human-centered design process to, work out some friction points in your life. The human-centered design process says, let's start with the user of the product or service. So in this case, it's who is at the center of your life. And I always say, there's only one person. It's you. All we have to do is get to know you. And there's usually a knee-jerk moment where people want to say, but wait, I have a romantic partner, or I have kids, I have coworkers, my parents depend on me, my organizations I'm a leader of, they depend on me. And it's always an interesting moment to go back and say, yes, those people might play supporting roles in your life, but you are the only one at the center of yours, because they have their own lives to worry about. Their happiness doesn't depend on you. In the same way that you have to be radically responsible for yourself, they have to be radically responsible for themselves. You may play a role in being a great spouse, being a great mom, that type of thing. But when it boils down to it, you said it in such a poignant way earlier on, your last breath is yours. That's it. You're the only one living this life. And I just think that is such a big concept for people to understand. Have you found that?
Yeah, and I think also what scares people is they sometimes think it's too late. It is never too late. It is never too late, because we have the ability to reinvent. We have the ability to start over, start a new job, a new career. We have that ability. We have the ability to move to a town, or make new friends. And it isn't about leaving the past behind and saying, see ya. But at the same time, I really think that we've all been given this blessing of life. And, call it whatever game you want, Monopoly, or, whatever game, right? But play the game of life, play it full out. And sometimes, well, hopefully you don't go to jail like in Monopoly, but sometimes, get $200 for passing go. Sometimes you're going to just kind of hang out in the parking lot. Everybody knows the game, but it's really just relishing in every day. And, you and I and everybody who's had those heartbreak or challenges, it's just about taking that next card and just seeing what it says. So in the game of life, you take a card, where does that take you next? And then you move yourself along the board. And that's what it's about.
So you have this, you have this expertise from the work that you've been doing and the speaking that you've been doing and the writing and everything. Someone listening to this, I promise, is going through their own challenging season. I actually have heard from a few listeners recently who are going through some extremely difficult interpersonal time periods. I won't call anyone out or give any specifics, but there have been some recent conversations that people are going through some really hard things. What What advice do you have for them, or what words of wisdom do you have for them as they are currently in a season that is really difficult?
Yeah, because sometimes, again, it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel when you're in it. My best advice is to not be alone. And what I mean by that is sometimes when we're alone with our thoughts, we overthink things. We worry about the future. We focus too much on the past and what could have been, woulda, coulda, shouldas, right? I think there's a lot of power in camaraderie. And that's what makes podcasts like this so special. That's what makes networking groups so useful. That's why we celebrate and we spend parties with friends and family. And when you're alone, you're experiencing life by yourself. And yes, this is your life. You are the character of your life. But at the same time, we're not meant to live life alone. So when someone's having a hard time right now and they're worried and they're scared and they're unsettled about what could be, I just encourage them to plug in to talking to you. They could call me. Different friends are going to be good sounding boards for different reasons. And so think about those people in your life. They're not going to be a one size fits all. You're going to have that one friend that gives really good advice, and go to that person for that advice. You're going to also have another friend who just sits there and listens, and they are just meant there for you to vent. Then there's going to be that person who, quite frankly, is not the best advice giver, but they're the person who makes you laugh. They're the person who distracts you from your sadness. So you want to figure out who are those people in your life that you can go to. And every day is going to be different. When I've gone through my hard times, I needed all those different people. And I had all those different solutions and probably a good variety of 10 friends.
It's that advice is backed up by so much research and so much science in the field of positive psychology. That field gets such a bad reputation sometimes because people think the field is only about telling people to pretend like everything is positive and pretend like it's going well and sort of fake it. But ultimately, positive emotions are only one small facet of us living what they call the good life, or flourishing, or really thriving. And interpersonal relationships, positive, supportive interpersonal relationships, are a massive factor, protective factor for people, both going through adversity and when things are going well. People do better. They thrive more when they have those positive interpersonal relationships. So your advice is very soundly backed up by a lot of science saying that it is such an important driver of people doing well. That's amazing. If people are more interested in the work that you're doing with Living Full Out, or the speaking that you're doing, or your blog, where can people find you?
Well, they can go to livingfullout.com. That's kind of like the main hub of everything. So when you go there, if you're somebody who needs to get motivated by reading, then check out our blog, because we have a lot of different topics that we cover there. If you're somebody that is motivated by podcasts or a radio show like ours, then that would be a great way to plug in. Plus, we actually do take live callers throughout the show. So if you do need some life coaching advice, on that radio page would be the 800 number to call in. Call in and you'll hear me and talk to me live on the show. We also do a lot with social media because we want to inspire people. So we share other empowering stories of what others have overcome and stories of resilience. And so check us out on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Pinterest and YouTube and all those goodies, right? But most of all, I want to make sure that your community goes to you 100% for, that sounding board moment, for advice, for coaching. If they want, they're more than welcome to reach out to me at connect@livingfullout.com. And the other thing I want to share with your audience, because again, I really believe in that camaraderie that we all learn from each other, and I'm so honored to have been here with you today, is that if someone in your audience has a story, they've overcome something, I would love to consider having them on my show. Because when you share your story, again, you take your power back, and then you share the lessons of what you learned and you pay it forward to others. So again, anybody who has a story of what they've overcome, they're welcome to reach out to me at connect@livingfullout.com.
Thank you so much. This has been such, frankly, a motivating conversation, because as you've shared your experience, just both in, your vision loss and then also in the work that you're doing within your company, it just makes me think forward and makes me think ahead about how I can set myself up in the best possible way to thrive and succeed in whatever is coming in the future. So how can I think about setting myself up well to do even better tomorrow and make the most of whatever tomorrow's pie looks like? And so I just appreciate you being willing to share so openly about your story and then use it as such a sounding board for other people to learn about how they can, live fully in their lives and learn from the lessons that you've learned. So I so appreciate you being willing to be here today and being so open about everything.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And truly, I hope everybody lives full out today. Put together that list, think about your pie, and most of all, live in the moment. That's what it's about.
All right, friends, that was my interview with the amazing and inspiring Nancy Solari. And, this podcast, it began back in the day, back in my early episodes. My biggest goal at that time was to just feature these amazing women who have such an incredible story to share and so many lessons to share. But over time, it has morphed into so much more than that, because what I've found is that every single woman who is in this position has incredible knowledge and incredible value to share with all of us that help us live our lives better. And bottom line, that's my biggest goal with this podcast now, is to help you all learn from other women how to make your lives even more vibrant, even more aligned, and even more fulfilling than they already are. So I will always hop on at the end of these episodes to make sure that I drive home a few key points from the interview that I know will help each and every one of you. So the few things that I want to hit from this interview: number one, I mentioned it in the intro and you could hear it throughout the interview with Nancy. She is such a beautiful example of someone who has taken radical responsibility for her life, even though she has experienced incredible adversity. Now, I saw this in my own life. I was sitting at my computer one day. Some of you have heard this story. I was sitting at my computer one day in graduate school. This is long after I had lost my dad to cancer. This is long after I had been experiencing crazy symptoms from multiple sclerosis, blindness and numbness and paralysis and all the stuff. But in that moment, I was physically able and I was doing pretty well. But I realized that I was not, in Nancy's words, I was not living full out. I was living really passively, actually. I was devoting all my time and attention to school, and that was really all I was doing, in spite of the fact that I had other things on my heart and on my mind that I wanted to try. And Nancy mentioned it too, about other people's expectations of us and what they think that we should be doing and how we need to cast those aside. That was another thing that was weighing on me at the time. I was sitting there paralyzed, not physically at this point, but in my life paralyzed, not going after the things that I wanted to try and wanted to do because I was putting all my energy into school and I was scared of what other people would think. So I loved this interview with Nancy because she is yet another example of someone who's gone through something so difficult, but someone who's taking radical responsibility for the situation that they're in. And she made there's sort of a beautiful nuance to that, right? Radical responsibility says you alone are responsible for where you go next and how you handle yourself going forward. But one of the things that you can do for yourself is get a group of people around you who can support you. And so for Nancy, that was that group of 10 people that she talked about. Each of them served a very different, slightly different nuanced role in supporting her. But yes, even though you are at the center of your life, yes, even though your life is yours and yours alone, one intentional decision that you can make is to get yourself a support mechanism around you. So I loved that she was another example of somebody who is exerting radical responsibility on their life, but the nuance around how she has pulled other people in as a support for her, it was just so beautiful. I just loved it. The second piece is that Nancy's a great example of somebody who has looked ahead, looked at what could happen to her, knowing that her vision will get worse and that she could potentially see nothing one day. And instead of allowing that to scare her into not moving, being paralyzed in the way that I was in graduate school, instead of letting that scare her, she's using that as a catalyst to get the information and skill set that she needs in order to thrive in the event that that situation happens. So many times we can see the inevitable coming, but the inevitable is really scary. And the inevitable is something that we don't want to accept and don't want to think about. But by pushing it away, we are losing the opportunity to set ourselves up to thrive and be successful in that situation. So please consider that. If you're going through a difficult situation and the future looks scary, think about it in terms of how can you empower that future self of yours to thrive through whatever it is that you have coming. You can do it. And the last piece, I loved our conversation around it never being too late and living each day completely as fully as you can and reinventing yourself if you need to. I've heard this so many times from people who have reached out to me about this podcast, saying that they feel stuck, that they feel like it's too late for them, or that they've been in this career and they can't change. You can always change. You can always reinvent yourself. It's such an amazing time where information and tools are available for free on the internet. You can learn a new skill set and learn something new that you are passionate about that you might not have been before. You absolutely can reinvent yourself, and it is so worth it to do it when you think about it in the context of only being here once and only getting one life, only getting one shot at it. If reinvention is the thing that will make you happy in the next chapter of your life, please do it. It's worth it. It's so worth it. I want you all to feel empowered when you leave these episodes. I want you all to feel like you have this gang of women behind you who are cheering you on, because let me tell you, every single time I do one of these interviews, the authenticity and the passion and the excitement in my guests' voices when they give words of wisdom to those of you who are listening, it just makes me know that every single one of them is cheering for us to do our best and to go after something really big. So please consider going after something bigger than where you're at today. Please consider taking control of your life and living it full out, to totally use Nancy's example. I hope you guys loved this interview with Nancy Solari. Coming up, we have so many amazing women. I can't even stand it. I am so lucky to be able to have the conversations that I get to have and meet the women that I get to meet. And I feel so honored to get to bring their stories and their lessons to you each and every week. So thank you to every one of you who listens to me each week, for every comment, for every DM, for every tag on social media. If you loved this episode, screenshot it, tag me, tag Nancy. We would love to hear from you and would love to hear what you're learning from these episodes. All right, guys, take care. Have an amazing week. Before we close out today, I want to say thank you to my producer, Cameron Hill, and to my incredible sponsor, Modern Well. If you want to learn more about how you can reach your goals in a one-of-a-kind work-life community, visit www.modernwell.co. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who might benefit from this inspiring message. And if you have a moment, click the link in the episode description to leave me a rating and a review on iTunes. It would mean so much to me. Finally, I want to remind you that it is absolutely possible to live a happy, fulfilling life, even in spite of all of the chaos and demands we all experience. Sign up at aprilseifert.com to gain access to tools that will help you do just that. I have carefully created and curated a set of tools that combine the powerful fields of psychology and design thinking to help you intentionally create a fulfilling, happy life you love. Thank you so much for joining me this week, and until next week, stay inspired.